looking at the Sean Napier with Police Enforcer E-frame action figure from the Exosquad series of toys. Released in 1994, the figure itself was produced in Macau, while the box was produced in China. In spite of not being released earlier, the Police Enforcer E-frame is easy to find these days. At the time of this video, complete in-box examples of the figure can be found on eBay for under $80 if you're willing to be a little patient, though it is also quite common to see them listed for in excess of $100, and sometimes even more. Loose examples of the figure frequently show up in Exosquad lots and can frequently be found for less than $10. At the time I am recording this video, I would say finding a complete in-box example of the figure is moderately rare, but by no means impossible. Watch eBay for a month and it's a good bet at least one will pop up. I can remember seeing this figure on toy shelves in abundance up through 1998, and I will also say that this figure holds a particular bit of personal relevance to me, as it was the first Exosquad figure I ever got as a child. It wasn't this particular figure, mind you. This is one I got off eBay much more recently. I'll talk more about the figure itself later in the video. Right now, I'm talking about the box. Like most of the early Exosquad figures, Sean Napier with the Police Enforcer E-frame was originally released in this panel-style box, meaning that it had a full panel that opens up to reveal the entire figure inside. Having a full panel meant that the box could have a large piece of artwork, showing the E-frame and character. As a child, I didn't appreciate how much of a difference this made. In the 90s, cartoons were all hand-drawn, which meant that corners were frequently cut to meet production times. Because of this, images of things were potentially fluid, and sometimes just downright wonky. Having this wide panel to work with, the box artists were able to paint this full scene showing the E-frame and character in action. I can remember seeing the wall of images in the toy store and just being possessed by the desire to have the toys. This art, while being one of the less dynamic examples of the type, is still fantastic. We have Napier advancing in the ruins of a burning city during a battle. We can see an Exo Trooper to his left, and what I presume to be Bronski to the right. Napier's face in this image really kind of sells the idea that the Police Enforcer is a bit of a tank. He's not concerned with small arms fire and is just able to focus as he pilots the E-frame. He is just tromping forward in the midst of the battle, letting loose with his own assault. Speaking of which, I love some of the action effects used in this image. We see the flame effect from the flamethrower on the right arm, and the incredibly inaccurate and comically oversized muzzle flashes on the machine guns on the left arm. I mean, it is utterly fantastic how absurd it is. Just a very brief introduction to firearms technology to explain that point. A bullet works by setting off a small explosion in a confined space, which produces a pressure wave that propels the bullet in a given direction. The explosion is the result of the gunpowder igniting, while the jacket of the bullet directs the force of the explosion and thus expels the bullet forward. The muzzle flash is a result of a small portion of that explosion escaping the barrel. The only way the muzzle flash would be this large is if a substantial amount of the explosion was escaping the barrel. Or, more precisely, if the gunpowder itself was burning off outside the jacket, which is just wildly inefficient and ineffective. It looks so cool though, and since this is art, the rule of cool does kind of override anything else. One of the things I love about this image is the feet of the E-frame. I just love the little details like the dirt and scratches and the dust being kicked up by it. It just really helps sell the idea this is a big honking 2-ton machine tromping through the battlefield. Opening the panel, we see that the E-frame and the Sean Napier figure are both on display. I personally prefer to store the pilot in the E-frame itself, and ultimately I try to find an extra loose figure to put in the pilot space of the insert. As you can see, I haven't gotten one for Sean Napier yet. The reverse side of the panel includes the Exosquad Wants You section, with Marsh doing the Uncle Sam Wants You pose, and a brief explanation of what an E-frame is. I still love this congratulations bit. As a kid, I thought it was great that Marsh was congratulating me for being selected to defend mankind. While as an adult, I find it amusing that I'm being congratulated on dropping $15 on an action figure. Below the Exosquad Wants You blip, we have the Weapon Systems Instructions, with the Battle Prep and Attack Plan sections. The Battle Prep section shows you how to place Napier into the E-frame, close the shield, and then load the fusion missile clusters. The Attack Plan is apparently to use the medium-range Neo cannons, then move into close range to use the glowing Exo flamethrower, and to finish off with the presumably long-range fusion missile clusters. Like, there are just so many questions that raises in my mind. Like, number one, it's a police enforcer E-frame, and has a flamethrower and missile launchers? What? So, first off, why do the police have ready access to a flamethrower? Second, why missiles? Like, I can understand the concept for, like, a tear gas launcher or a net launcher or something of that nature, but missiles? Anyway, side tangent, this is getting into more of a discussion of the E-frame as an item in the universe rather than a review of the figure, so I'll come back to those points later. Right now, let's flip the box over and check the back. The panel flap boxes had more space to work with, so this box has the "Welcome to the Future" introduction paragraph in the upper left corner of the box. The blurb explains the general premise of the Exosquad series. Below that, we have the pilot bio card. I always found the bio card for Napier to be noteworthy because there's nothing mentioned on it that isn't directly confirmed in the series. Like, okay, let's look at Wolf Bronski's bio card for an example of what I mean about material being directly confirmed or not directly confirmed in the series. So, Bronski is listed as the Ground Assault Officer. Okay, the only rank or position he's ever referred to by in the series is Trooper. I also kind of doubt he's an officer just because logically you don't have a sergeant giving an officer orders. The card also says he has the longest service record of anyone in the Exosquad. There are certainly pieces in the series that could be interpreted as supporting this, but it's never actually stated he has the longest service record in the series. It says Bronski is a little unorthodox. Well, we never really have anything in the series to compare his particular actions to, so whether they're unorthodox or not is kind of up for debate. There is nothing on this card that is contradicted by anything in the show, but the points I just talked about aren't explicitly demonstrated or stated in the series. And because of the material, they could be interpreted in different ways. Now, let's compare this to Sean Napier's card. First line, he was discharged for insubordination.
Napier, you were kicked out of the Exosquad because of an attitude. That same problem is about to get you booted off the force.
Yep, that's confirmed right in the series. He became a security officer in Chicago.
A milestone. Napier, where you been? The captain's ready to send out an APB.
I was discussing current events with a concerned citizen.
Mr. Button.
Not my day, I guess.
Uh-huh. Where he saved Phaeton.
What the? Get down!
Yep. It says he has a strong mistrust for Neosapiens, even Marsala.
The real war's down here, fighting the Neos hand to hand. And you bring him along. Listen, Marsh may trust you, but you're still just another Neo to me.
Yep, again. It says his E-frame was stolen when he broke out of the camps. and there he is breaking out. See what I mean? I will be honest and say I'm not totally sure what to make of this. Either the bio card was directly lifted from the show itself, or the material used in the bio was directly taken from the production materials for the show, and there wasn't any space for interpretation, or I don't know.
Baloney! You blew it!
Yeah, look, calm down, Napier. It's not that big a deal. So, let's check out the Weapon Systems and Ordnance card. Like all general-purpose E-frames, the card calls out the Fusion Pack, the regenerative power cell at the heart of the E-frame system, the Cyberjack, which links the E-frame pilots to the E-frame machinery, allowing telepathic robotic movement, and the Clear Vision Protective Shield, being a super sealed enclosure protecting the E-frame pilots. The Police Enforcer mounts a series of 3 other weapon systems. The first one is the Exospring-powered Fusion Missile Cluster Launcher. The description says, bombard targets with up to 8 missiles with each overhead launch. I'm going to come back to this from an in-universe perspective because I want to talk about the other weapons in comparison to the description here. So that brings us to the next weapon, the glowing Exo-flamethrower. The description says, add blazing firepower to the Terran defense of Earth. This is something I kind of like from an in-universe perspective. Flamethrowers are relatively low-tech weapons, but are high terror, based on that primal fear of being burned alive. So this would be a perfectly viable weapon that could be assembled in a back alley or a workshop and mounted on E-frame chassis without issue. Add a pump and you increase the bloom effect. Add a nozzle, you increase control. Basically, look at water gun designs and you can find a variety of options to specialize the weapon. Refueling it would be fairly easy, since all that is required is a liquid or heavy gas that is flammable. Distilled alcohol would do it. The other weapon system is the reciprocating double-barreled Neo Cannon, which recoils and reloads while still blasting Neo forces. There really isn't much to say about that. An auto-loading machine gun is pretty reasonable, all told, even if the E-frame started its life as a police platform. Now, I said I was going to come back to the Fusion Missile Cluster Launcher. As I mentioned, the Exo-flamethrower and the Neo Cannon are both fairly reasonable armaments. The Cluster Launcher, on the other hand, that just raises so many questions about why a police vehicle would have a weapon like this. I mean, the opening narration for the first episode says,
It was a golden age for mankind. The Earth knew no hunger, no want.
What sort of golden age was mankind experiencing that the cops needed to use missile launchers? I mean, I've seen people suggest that they were converted from being smoke grenade launchers or tear gas launchers, but grenade launchers and missile launchers are entirely different mechanisms. You don't convert the launcher from one to work with the other any more than you can convert a V8 big block to work like the engine off an F-18 Hornet. While the technologies have some similarities, they are entirely different machines. This is one of the things that make me wonder about the background for the Police Enforcer E-frame from an in-universe perspective. But that's a topic for later in the video. Let's go ahead and check out the figure itself. Alrighty, and here we have the actual figure itself. This is Sean Napier in the Police Enforcer E-frame. Give a full view here. So in here we have the reciprocating, what do they describe it as? Recoils and reloading while still, the reciprocating double-barreled Neo Cannon. This part here. As kind of a gimmick, you have a wheel here that you can thumb back and forth to imitate a reciprocating motion. We have the transparent fusion cell. slides back in there. The glowing, quote-unquote, flamethrower. And then the missiles. Or, I'm sorry, the cluster launchers. Okay. So, as this was one of the earlier figures that was produced, it does still have full knees. Those kind of went out of style in the Wave 3 produced E-frames. So, unlike most of the E-frames, its arms do not have elbows. It just has the shoulder joints, so it can aim up and down with each of its side weapons like this. And then, of course, it's launching missiles. So, the missiles are pretty typical for a 90s action figure. Nothing really worthwhile to talk about on that. So, let's take a look at some of the details. So, most of the detail on the front is either large oblique details like, the ankles, the hydraulics, stuff like that, or are stickers like this piece here on the kneecap and inside the cockpit. So we get some more detail on the body of the weapon. We've got a mold mark here. I do have to admit, my years of model building experience really kind of give me a craving to take a file to that, smooth it down, clean up this seam line. So, panning around. Got some good detail and gribbling on the back. I do love the wire work coming off of the fusion pack. But this part here kind of aggravates me because it's like, okay, you gave us sculpted detail up here. Why are you giving us a sticker down here? Like, why can't you just sculpt the detail there? So, here is the aerial antenna that I mentioned in my differences comparison. So the back of the legs are a pretty heavy industrial look. I could very easily see these kind of details on, a excavator or a large-scale forklift, which kind of gives me the impression that this was designed as, industrial equipment first and was co-opted for combat later. So continuing around. So we come around to the other side, which is largely the same as the right side or left side. The only difference is the flamethrower. Now I did set up something here. So I have a little light here that I set up. Let me turn off my more direct lights here. There we go. So you see, you can get it to light up by putting a light up to either section of it. And I will be honest, this is something that really kind of irks me because, if you look at the size of the battery and the light I'm using here, I mean, there's more than enough room inside this component to include a light up feature. And I admit the most likely reason for why they didn't is cost. But it is such a simple mechanism to put in. I really feel like they should have gone the extra mile and done this. Because without a light up source here, like, this is just plastic. There's nothing to it. That's just translucent plastic. So, but we have the Napier figure. I will admit, I always disliked getting him in and out of this E-frame, because unlike most E-frames, this part opens down as opposed to up. And then the second thing is, unlike most E-frames, Napier doesn't hold on to handles on the arms. He holds on to handles on this motorcycle front. So getting him into the E-frame is a little bit challenging. And yeah, I never bother with the Cyberjack on the figures. If anything, it pushes the figure out and makes it even more difficult to get into the pilot seat. So, and then with him latched in, clip the hands onto the handlebars, have him pop out, and push him back in, line the legs up, and then we can close up the legs, and Napier is ready for battle. So, as I mentioned in my review, the figure is pretty easy to get a hold of, and I've dismantled a couple of these for custom work. At the time of this video, I have a work in progress of converting one into what has been called the Military Enforcer E-frame. We see Jinx piloted a couple times in Season 1. So I can talk about the internal construction a decent amount, what little there is. The only real point to talk about are the legs. And you can't really see it here. But the way the legs are built, they're literally built in, how do I put this? Sections of halves, I guess is a good way to put it. So basically, this half and this half are two separate pieces held together by a screw, as are this half and this half. But these two pieces are held together by a pin here that holds the hydraulic end. So if you go to dismantle one of these, realize you have to take a look at these pins here to take apart the legs. So, that's the only really hard part about dismantling this, because everything else is straight two-piece construction. The body, there's nothing really tricky about it. What you can't see until you dismantle it, this portion inside the shoulder right here is actually an insert piece. So you have the front half, the back half, and then insert pieces. Okay. It's not a problem, just be aware this is actually 4 parts, not 2. And then of course the fusion pack, Greebling. One thing that has surprised me, this is not a multi-part design. Well, let me explain this. This was designed in multi-parts. You can see the seam line right here. But what you cannot do is take this apart. I did actually try to disassemble one of these so that I could put in a light up feature, only to find out this entire section is, glued or welded together. So like you can't just take a knife, put it in the seam here and pry it apart. It's not going to work, and you're probably going to break the blade. So yeah. So the shoulders do have a ratchet system in it. You can hear the clicking in there. So the nice thing is it keeps the arms in whatever position you put them in. So, and then we have the aerial antenna and the 2 radial antennas up here on top of the missile pack. I do have to call one thing out. This sticker here, this always really bugged me, because like this is a police light, these are vents. So the vents, they might make sense. You have to take a little liability with it. Escaping gases, they want the heat of the launching missiles vented away from the pilot, so okay, that makes sense. But if that's the case, you want the vents back here. because all the thrust is being thrown this way. But, okay, I can roll with that one. The police light bugs me because it's a police light. It's meant to be raised up and highly visible. Right? You know, like these. Why have it on the sticker? Like, I know, I'm just being picky, but just that bugs me. So, here is Sean Napier with Police Enforcer E-frame. In the 90s, it was standard practice to use pre-production and prototype builds for the images on the back of the box and in the instructions. This meant there could be differences between the images used in those materials and the final mass-produced toy. Likewise, there were typically also differences between the produced toy and the animated inspiration. The Police Enforcer E-frame has a few major differences between the images on the box, the final figure, and the animated version. So, looking at the Weapon Systems and Ordnance card, the first obvious difference I see is the color of the flamethrower. The figure has a transparent blue piece, while the image on the box is red. The flamethrower on the box also has a looped cable on the main body that the toy does not. Comparing this to the animated version is a whole different story. Firstly, the show's representation of it doesn't have a glowing barrel. Secondly, the barrel itself is shorter and more cylindrical rather than phallic. Never really thought of that before. The next difference I see is on the ankles, or rather around them. In both the animated version and the images on the box, the Police Enforcer E-frame has angular rebars around the ankles. The animated version has them on the inside and outside of the ankle, while the box image only has them on the outside, while the figure itself lacks them entirely. The Neo cannon weapon also has some differences. The animated version has a pair of cables coming off the back of the body of the weapon and connecting to the shoulder mount. The image on the box appears to have one cable coming off the back of the weapon and going to the shoulder, and a second coming off the side of the body. There is another difference, and I'm honest, I cannot explain this one: the position of the aerial antenna. The figure has it on the right side, while the box art and the animated version have it on the left, while the box image lacks it entirely. This is such a simple detail with no obstructions whatsoever. I cannot figure out why it's not consistent. Like, if you don't want to have it, don't have it. But if you're going to have it, why put it in different places like this? I don't know what to say about this. There is one other difference I'm going to point out, but I'm going to put an asterisk at the end of it. In the box images, the missiles have a yellow stripe around the cluster bodies of the missiles, while the missiles for the figure itself do not have that stripe. The animated version does not have any sort of stripe around the bodies of its missiles. Now, I said I was putting an asterisk at the end of this difference, and here's why. As I said, I had this figure as a child. I very distinctly remember using the narrow end of a pen cap to smooth down a yellow sticker around the body of the missiles to recreate this look. But if you look at a scan of the sticker sheet, there are no yellow striped stickers for the missiles. So I don't really know what to say here. Either there was a different run of the figure that had the yellow striped stickers for the missiles, and I got that as a kid, which I have no hard evidence to support that summation, or I'm remembering the missiles from a totally different toy. I will admit the latter is more likely, but I very distinctly remember putting the stickers on my Sean Napier figure. So, anyway, that completes my look at the Exosquad Police Enforcer E-frame with Sean Napier. Next time I'll be looking at Jonah Simbaka with the Pirate Captain E-frame. But before I finish out, I want to pose a question to you. I hinted throughout the review about the viability of different aspects of the Police Enforcer E-frame. from the ease of building and fueling a flamethrower to the use of cluster bombs on a police vehicle. But there's one aspect of it I haven't talked about. That is, where did it come from? By that I mean, who built it originally? We see it in use by all factions in the series. We first saw an E-frame that might be the basis for the Police Enforcer E-frame in Episode 4, Blitzkrieg, when a pair of them capture Napier, implying that it is a Neosapien built E-frame. But then we see that Napier is familiar with it when he escapes the Neosapien prison camp, which means that it might have been in use by the Exo-fleet. We later see it in use by the Australian Resistance Group, and later still in use by Exo-fleet. So, what is the background of this E-frame? Is it a Terran-built E-frame that the Resistance modified? Is it something that the Neosapiens were permitted to produce in limited numbers? Could it have a totally different history, like it was originally construction equipment that got co-opted for combat? I've included a link to a form in the description of this video for that exact question. So if you have a couple minutes, fill that out and tell me your thoughts. When I've gotten enough to fill a 10 to 12 minute video, I'll revisit the idea and talk about what you've all mentioned in that form. Be sure to keep an eye out for any upcoming reviews, where I will check out Jonas Simbaka with Pirate Captain E-frame, and later Peter Tanaka with the Samurai E-frame.